Good evening and welcome to the Stillman School of Business virtual networking series. We're going to get started in a few moments. And I think we're waiting for more people to come in right now.
Yeah, they're still connecting, but
Okay.
I think we're good to just keep moving. Yep.
Okay, so thank you for joining us for our virtual networking event with a focus on accounting, brought to you by the Department of Alumni Engagement Philanthropy and the Stillman School of Business and our local chapter of Beta Alpha Psi. My name is Mark Holtzman. I'm going to be moderating today's session, and I'm the chairman of the Department of Accounting and Taxation here at Seton Hall, and also one of the advisors to Beta Alpha Psi. So today's event is part of an ongoing virtual series to bring together Stillman alumni and students as we discuss specific industries and offer an opportunity to network with one another. Before we get started, I want to share some reminders and notes. We're taking questions live and encourage your participation. If you have a question, type the question using the chat feature on your screen. It's on mine, at least it's on the bottom of the screen here. Feel free to ask questions as you think of them throughout the presentation through the chat box on your screen. If you need assistance during the presentation, please also use the chat feature on the right sidebar, and my colleagues are going to reach out to you in a private chat. And with that, I'm going to introduce our industry guests. I'll start with Mike and Ella. Mike, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Absolutely. So I'm a Seton Hall grad from 2002. I am the CFO of Pershing Square Capital Management. It is a large $10 billion hedge fund run by William A. Ackman, run out of New York. We have a listed vehicle in London and Amsterdam that's on the FTSE 250, which is like, think about the London version of the S&P 500. And I've been there for almost 17 years.
Thank you, Michael. And Lara Kanjo, please. Lara.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lara Kanjo. I am a Seton Hall alumni. I graduated with my undergraduate degree in accounting in 2005 and with my master's in professional accounting in 2006. I am an audit partner at Ernst & Young. I have been at Ernst & Young since I graduated from Seton Hall. In fact, I interned at Ernst & Young the summer before my senior year of college and never left. So welcome, nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Lara. And Jerry Pecoraro.
Hi, everybody, Jerry Pecoraro. I am an international tax senior manager out of Deloitte. Similar to Lara's story, I joined Deloitte right after college, right after the Hall, and I have not left. My focus in my area of specialty is international tax, primarily focused in working with large life science and pharmaceutical companies in this tumultuous time. But so it's a great time and great to be here.
Thank you, Jerry. And Michelle Kula.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Kula. I actually graduated with Jerry back in 2010 with both my undergrad and MSPA from Seton Hall. Similar to Jerry and Lara, I started at KPMG little over 10 years ago, and I've been there ever since. I'm a senior manager in the audit practice, mainly serving retail and life sciences clients. And happy to be here and meet all of you this evening.
And I'll just say, it really gives me a special sense of pleasure, and having Mike, Lara, Jerry, and Michelle here, they're all former students of mine, and it's really, as an educator, it gives you a tremendous satisfaction to see your students move up in the world and advance and grow both in their careers and personally. And I've been privileged to stay in touch with all four of our panelists, and really very proud to have them here today. So I'd also like to thank Dean Strouser for joining us, and thank our friends at Alumni, at Seton Hall Alumni for planning this event. So excellent. We appreciate everyone being here today. Let's start talking through some of these questions. And what I've done is I've prepared a set of questions, but again, you also have the ability to add questions here. And I'm going to start with the big question that's that I think everybody's asking. And that's obviously the impact that COVID is having on the profession. And when COVID first hit, there were different stories coming from different places. The overall, what I was hearing anecdotally was that COVID is having a rather career-wise, is rather having a big demand, is rather increasing the demands for accountants. But also heard some news about some layoffs in certain firms. So what I'd like to start off is by asking our panelists if they can share with us their thoughts on how COVID is impacting the demand for accounting professionals right now. And we'll start with Mike, please.
Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate it. So, I mean, from my standpoint and from my industry standpoint, I actually don't think there's been really a reduction in demand for accounting. I think, again, one of the major benefits of accounting is that in good times or in bad, every firm still needs financial statements. Every firm still has a tax return. Every firm still needs kind of operational help. So what I've seen is that demand has been pretty steady, if not more in demand. So I think it's been good.
Thanks, Mike. And Lara?
I would agree with what Mike has said. There's always going to be a need for accountants, whether that be in the public sector, the private sector, meaning working for companies, whether it be in audit, tax, actually doing compilation of financial statements. That need is not going away anytime soon. And so while we have seen some industries in particular be impacted more than others, particularly with our client base and some of the industries like retail, for example, that have been hit hard by the global pandemic, overall from an accounting perspective, the demand is the same. And certainly from a public accounting perspective, and when I think about the EY business, there's been a significant amount of opportunity and need for people in accounting that can do more than just audit and tax, that are really helping our clients operationally move forward and get through this pandemic successfully.
And Michelle, you're also working in audit. Do you have anything to add to what Lara is saying?
Yeah, I think from an audit perspective overall, the pandemic has really exacerbated the risks that were already there. So, while we always dealt with impairments and, employee-related matters, now we're dealing with a much higher volume of those audit judgments that might not necessarily have in the past. Companies that we've seen who were historically really profitable, and there was never the need for those risky judgments. Now it's not as clear and as easy as an answer as it always was in the past. So I think they're looking to us more and more as their trusted advisors to help them navigate everything that's coming about as a result of the pandemic.
Thanks, Michelle. And Jerry, in tax, how do you see things right now?
Tax is out of control in a good way. I think, I don't think if you ask any tax professional, they will say that particularly those working in international tax, working in multi-state, working in a federal context, we haven't yet, we're still licking our wounds from tax reform that happened in 2017. And now we're at the point where all of a sudden COVID hits, and we have now a CARES Act. We have definitely lots of changes going on in the tax environment, and it's happening in a split moment. And I think from a tax perspective, we are just seeing incredible amount of change in such a short amount of time.
Right.
And it really requires those professionals that are going to hit the ground running and just go all in.
So Jerry, with the CARES Act, and I guess this applies just as much in auditing with the types of the impacts that Michelle has been talking about. How do you keep up with all these changes that are going on? Tax is changing. There are a lot of changes that are coming on, and likely changes that may happen in the coming months. And how do you handle that? How do you keep on top of it all?
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, another thing that I struggle with is there is news coming out. There are changes, legislative reforms, regulatory guidance for those like myself who also assist as tax specialists on accounting side. We're having to deal with, well, what is the FASB saying about this? What do they want us to think about? So it really comes down to, at the end of the day, understanding what is your niche and really focusing in on that and going after those news sources that are going to help you there. So whether it's every day setting out time to read alerts, to go into the Bloombergs and the CCH's research engines that have daily feedback and a feed of the updates, and understanding them and just reading through them. Certainly, like any other big four, there are certainly lots of internal webcasts, and also publicly available alerts and such that our firms are preparing from our national offices and sending out so that the public can understand what these rules are. So it's attending those with our clients and as well as preparing for those ahead of the webcast, and really getting grounded, because when news breaks, such as like the CARES Act, our clients are the next phone call after it hits, and so time is of the essence to know it, and really need to be ready to go.
Jerry, it mirrors some advice a mentor of mine gave me years ago. He said, if you really want to be successful, you have to be the expert, not an expert. You have to be the expert who people go to for a specific topic, and people will always come to you for that. And he certainly exemplified that. And I try also in some ways. Michelle, and how do you stay on top of it all?
So I think, as Jerry said, staying on top of the blasts and the white papers that are internally published, but also keeping the connection with our specialists. I think I've probably spent more time in the last couple of months outside of tax reform dealing with our folks that help us on the audit assist side, from our federal, even our state and local and international tax practices, to help us navigate the changes as a result of COVID.
Right. And Lara, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I laughed when Jerry was talking about having a niche, because I think what I've learned in my career is the way to be successful is to know the people that are smarter than you about the topics that you don't know about. So when being a leader, in terms of, if you're trying to be the person that knows everything, you're going to fail. And so it's really making sure you stay well connected, whether it be internally within your organizations or externally, to know who to go to ask the question to, and to get the information, or to bring to your client to work through a topic or a tax legislation or even an accounting area. Because if you try to do it all by yourself, there's just too much. So know who the people are to help you.
That's really great advice. And Michael, in your end of the universe, how are you staying on top of it all?
Yeah, look, it's a massive challenge. So what I've tended to do is I try to tailor my CPE credit type work to things that really are part of my industry and things that are very specific to my industry. Also, I've very much focused on industry specific outings. So typically these types of things, they have experts both on the GAAP and on the tax side that kind of go into items that are very specific to what we do, right? So I go to hedge fund type things. But one kind of piece of advice I would give is to not just allow yourself to kind of read the blurbs, really kind of dig yourself into it, like especially on the tax side, like really read the regs, really read the statutes on your own, because this stuff does get very complicated. But, as far as the mountain of work that it is, focus on the things that matter the most to your industry and to what you're working on, become like an expert in those. And then, like the rest of the panel said, things that are a little bit outside of your expertise, try to get as much support you can from either your team or from outside people.
Thank you very much. Now, to shift topics a little bit, we've all, even though Jerry looks like he's in his office, he's really not. And we've all become very accustomed now to working from home. And I'd like your thoughts about this. And we would have very close companionship for weeks at a time working at an audit. I mean, we were like family members for a period of time. And that dynamic in the audit And even in tax, there was a lot of face-to-face interaction with the tax people too. And the profession always emphasized that accountants should be in their clients' offices and be seen. And we've completely changed that dynamic now towards virtual interactions. And I'd like your thoughts on how you're managing this shift from in-person interaction to video conference, email, Slack, or whatever other chat software you're using. And if you've learned any tricks or techniques that you'd like to share with our alumni and students. And I guess I'll start with Michael.
Yeah, look, from my standpoint, I have a team of 10 people that I manage. And it's been my experience that I try to have at least daily or every other day Zoom meetings for half an hour. And they should not just be focused on work. Half of it should be work, half of it should be personal. Exactly like you said, Dr. Holtzman, you want to maintain that same kind of we're all in this together type mentality. We're all doing this for the firm mentality. And that's really the best way I've seen to have that happen. It's a small thing, but it works well.
What do you mean by making part of it personal?
So talking about, what's going on in your lives. How are your kids doing? How is your significant other doing? What are you planning? Are you guys planning a vacation? Are you planning to go somewhere?
Right.
A lot of really important. I think a lot of what I've also seen is a lot of people have gone through a lot of mental anguish, whether because they've had some family members, having the virus or having some other ailments during this time period, or they're just stuck at home with very few people and it's really beginning to affect them. Getting that personal touch is really helpful to a lot of people.
Thank you. And Lara?
It's really interesting to do our jobs virtually on a day-to-day basis. I do think it does require a lot of effort, coordination, and work to make sure that every day I'm connected with my clients to make sure that they know I'm there to serve them and do it and help them with whatever they need, but also connected to my teams for all of the reasons that Mike mentioned, just to make sure that they feel like they're part of something. And quite honestly, to make sure that we're continuing to invest in the development of all of our people, because there is an aspect of personal development that happens when we're all sitting together in an audit room doing that work that doesn't exist when you're virtual. And so making sure we're continuing to connect with our clients is big, more so than ever. And also making sure that we're spending the time that we need with our teams in just coaching and professional development. The other two things that I've learned, which has been a challenge for me personally with being available and at home and on video all day, is that a majority of my days get booked up with Zoom or Teams meetings. And that has quickly made me become very unproductive. I get to an end of the day and I have nothing to show for what I did all day or accomplished because I've been on meetings all day. And so I've started to block time on my calendar so people cannot book meetings. And it's just my own time to actually get work done during the day, because by the time I get to night, and I have 3 small kids, so by the time I get them to bed and actually can sit and think about catching up on that, I'm just too tired. And as part of all of this, well-being is very important, and making sure you're getting enough sleep now more than ever is critical. So I've done that. Another thing that I actually have, that clients have done, and I thought this was really great. I don't know how good they've been about implementing it, but they have certainly made a significant effort, is my clients have actually picked 2 days during the week. So it's Wednesday afternoons from 12 to 6 and all day Fridays, where the company's policy is no Zoom meetings or calls, because they want to give the people the opportunity during the workday to do work and not have to be on the phone. And it's helping. It is helping people manage that work-life balance from home and be more productive during the day. The last thing that I'll say, which might be a little contradictory to what I was saying earlier about connecting with our people and continuing to make sure we're connecting with our clients, is that what we have learned is we can accomplish what we need most of the time in 30 minutes versus an hour. So instead of having these connections with our clients in particular that are long and extend over a long period of time, we can have the same quality connection and meeting with clients within 30 minutes. And that's better for everybody. They're efficient, they're quick. We don't lose the quality. We don't lose the connection that we want to have with them. And we're not taking up a larger block of the day. So that's also been a benefit and something that we've been working on through this virtual work environment.
Yeah, that's interesting. One thing I found similar to that is, the hour meeting I think is too long.
Yeah.
And Microsoft always, now Zoom, whatever it is, Teams we use, gives us recommendations when we want to make an hour-long meeting, saying, are you sure you want to need a whole hour to do this? It like says that in Microsoft Outlook. But one thing that I found is very helpful is not to have any back-to-back meetings at all.
Absolutely.
All about 10 minutes between meetings.
Yeah.
And this way, and people are okay with ending the meeting a little earlier. People usually don't have a problem with that, but give yourself a little bit of time between the meetings to get up and stretch. Michelle, is there something you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, so I really echo everything that everyone said. I think the single thing that has been huge for our teams to keep the connection is keeping the video on. I know there was a lot of team members that were resistant in the beginning, even on the client side, who said, oh, I'm not dressed, my hair is not done, I'm not going to turn my camera on. But slowly but surely, as we moved through the pandemic, people became less reluctant to put the camera on, and I think it has allowed us to continue to have those connections that we need. What I also think is really nice is, having everyone at home, you get to get a little bit of insight into their personal lives, to get to know them a little bit better. I was on a client call last night, and my 15-month-old daughter came into the room and stood behind and was blowing kisses to my client. So, it's not something you expect, and not something you normally think is very professional, but we're all kind of going through the same thing, and it's bound to happen when we're working in these remote environments. And I think it actually does bring us a little bit closer to our clients and our coworkers, because we get to have that little bit of insight into what's going on at home.
Lara, can I share what you were doing in our last meeting?
Yes, I was actually, this was the end of August, but I was at the pool with my kids in the afternoon, trying to spend some time with them, which is a benefit of being.
We were taking up instead.
Yeah, but it was. But yes, I try to do a lot of that. But you know what I even try to do sometimes as well, just again for well-being, is if it's a call that I don't need to be on Zoom, I try to take a walk. And so I've now started taking a lot of calls just on my phone, just doing walks around the block, just to get out of the house and get some fresh air. And that actually has been kind of invigorating. I feel very refreshed when I get back to my computer and ready to move on to the next Zoom call or task, whatever it may be. But I think it's really important to be on video, and that definitely needs to happen. I do think, though, where there are opportunities to step away, it's also very good too.
And Jerry, being a solitary tax man, how have you handled the transition to the online virtual environment?
Yeah, I would like to say that things are easy, but it's not the easiest I've found. We're getting by. I definitely, what Mike said earlier, I do that every day with my team. At 8:30 in the morning, we're all together. And right now, for those of you like in the corporate world, the corporate tax world, our deadline for our major returns is next week. I have a week to finish all these returns and get them out the door. So being with them, checking in with them, supporting them. If, as an example, my team is supporting me to be here with you guys, so they're taking on some other things. I have a coworker who's who's looking to buy a house, so he jumps out every once in a while to go to house viewings and go check those out. So it is difficult to go from an environment where, for instance, my team is very, very close. There's about 10 of us that we work day in and day out in the trenches on pretty much a single client, probably 364 days a year. And for us, it's very, very important that we stay connected. And we're friends. We're not just colleagues. We're friends. So it's important to keep that together. And through the comments that my co-panelists have mentioned, that's how you do it.
You know,
Thanks.
Dr. Holtzman, something
Yeah.
that I find interesting is that shortly before the pandemic, our firm rolled out this program called Work Your Way, which gave teams the opportunity to basically introduce some flexibility into their schedules, where associates could pick one day a week and work from home. And what we're finding is that teams were not using it as much as we would have expected that they were, because they said, oh, it's just easier to come in person, or it's harder to work from home. And I think what this has proven is that we can do it from home. So, you know, once this is all over and things are back to normal,
Right.
I do think that people will feel confident that that program can be rolled out in the way that it was intended, and can continue to have a little bit more flexibility in their day than in the past.
It's been a tremendous lesson in work-life balance. It's still a lesson in work-life balance and how to maintain that. You know, if anyone who feels that they mastered it, it's completely turned upside down last March. And now balancing work and life when you're working from home is a whole new challenge for a lot of us. Now, our students are facing a similar transition in that many of them are preparing for interviews. And in the past, those interviews were usually conducted, at least some of the interviews were conducted in person. They'd have a preliminary interview, usually in person, an office visit, and so on. And now that's been replaced by online interactions. And in fact, it's kind of coincidence, but Dean Strauss and I were just interviewing a candidate for a position online today. And so we're seeing this from the other end also. I'm wondering what advice you would give to students as they prepare for this entirely new approach towards interviewing, virtual networking, virtual interviews, and all the other interactions that they're going to be expecting as they apply for new positions, and hopefully in the next year and two to have internships and start full-time positions. So what advice would you give them on being noticed and becoming visible, let's say, in this new virtual environment? And I guess we'll start with Jerry.
I would say, if I reflect back to 10 years ago or 14 years ago when I was on the walking the halls of Stillman, back when you were allowed to even be on campus, but I understand. But the one thing that I prided myself on is I loved being a big fish in a small pond. I prided myself on getting to know the faculty, getting to know when recruiters would come to the university, getting to know them and understanding what their firm or their business did. The same advice stands the test of time. And so my recommendation would be for everybody here, when there is, when a firm comes to talk to, let's say, the students of Beta Alpha Psi or the accounting club, or there's an event like this, ask the questions. Be on camera, ask a question, be visible. Be a person that is ready to be noticed. And then when the time comes and there is your interview and whatnot, be ready for it. Because when you're on campus and in person, it's a little bit easier to have build that relationship and that rapport. There is that unspoken bond that you start building as you're in person with somebody. And so now virtually it becomes a lot more difficult. And there are people, excuse me, there are people and firms that are going to be doing all their interviewing for the next possibly a few years, all virtually. Deloitte, we effectively moved to virtual interviews as of last year, pre-COVID. And that's because it allows you the flexibility to do it when you can do it and in tight circumstances, and for us as professionals to do it as well, and to fit it in between meetings or client calls or whatnot. So I think what's really important is you need to stand out, and you need to put your name out there and really try to separate yourself apart by defining who you are and really being ready to take on a new advice.
Jerry, how do you push that out? Students might have one opportunity, two opportunities in a semester now, where they might have an online interaction. I mean, we have a wonderful group of students in this meeting right now, and they all want to be noticed.
Yep.
And how do they, in the past, they could push it out, and I could shake your hand and I could start to talk to you, and I could send you a follow-up email and say, hey, Jerry, it was really nice to meet you there, and I hope we'll get to meet again. And in the old system that we had, students could really build a relationship with alumni at different events, and even with recruiters, to where when they had an interview with someone, as I did many, many years ago, and I already knew the recruiter and she knew me, and we were shaking hands again, and we were like old friends. And that naturally led to a full-time position later on. And our students have become very good at doing that. But in this online environment, how can a student push a little harder to get noticed?
So I think you can take advantage of two things. First, events like this, or events when the Big Four come to talk, those professionals who are on the line, or the recruiters or whatnot, their job, or part of their job, let's say the recruiter's job, is to recruit.
Mm-hmm.
So reach out to those professionals and ask for a person. If you're interested in networking with somebody at Deloitte, as an example, particularly if you're looking for someone, hey, I'm looking to understand more about tax. Well, there are a number of us, particularly here in the New Jersey, New York practice, where they can reach out to us, and we can start that dialogue. Maybe it's through email. Maybe it's a coffee, a virtual coffee. Let's get together. Let's have
Jerry,
that.
is this an invitation?
Yeah, why not? Find me on LinkedIn.
Hear this? If you're interested in tax, Jerry's a person to call.
Yeah, and if you're over 21, I like red wine, so it's fine. We're gonna be great. But the important thing is to just you can still have that network. You can still network. It's just going to be done differently. So I'm not going to shake your hand, but I'm going to wave at you, and we're going to have the dialogue just like we would if we were face to face.
And Michelle, can people interested in auditing at KPMG, are you okay if they drop you a message and say hello?
Yeah, absolutely. I partake in the interviews on campus, or now virtual on-campus interviews, and there have been a number of situations during the course of the last year when our resource management team has reached out to me and had me speak to someone who was interested, trying to make a decision between whether they wanted to go into audit or tax, or commercial versus financial services. So we're definitely having all those touch points. And just to kind of highlight what Jerry said before, is being, if you want to stand out, we're not expecting anything crazy or spectacular, but being a student of the firm and being a sponge, and showing that you're enthusiastic and want to learn is one of the greatest ways to stand out in situations like this.
And if someone sends an email, let's say someone sends you an email saying, hey, it's very nice to meet you in the meeting last night, that's not too aggressive?
I don't think so.
Lara, what do you think?
I agree with everything Jerry and Michelle said. Don't be shy to personally reach out to somebody that may have attended a recruiting event, a panel like this, and make yourself known and visible.
And Michael?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Look, if you don't put the effort in, then you're always going to fail. So for things like this, you need to be, you don't want to be overly aggressive, but you do want to be aggressive. And something as simple as asking a really good question, and I'll give you a quick story. Myself, when I was at Seton Hall, there was a Merrill Lynch event in New York City, because there's a few alumni that, had, call it, 100 of us come over, and they were introducing us to different parts of the bank. And when we were there, there was, there was a session where we could ask questions. And some of the questions that were being asked, how do you like your job? How's your commute? Which in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm not sure why you would ask them those questions in this kind of particular circumstance. I raised my hand and I asked the question about what he thought about the consolidation of the banking industry between commercial banks and investment banks, and how that was going to affect banking on a going forward basis. And this guy was like, wow, you can see the reaction, like, wow, it's actually a good question. I sent him an email the next day, and he's like, I know exactly who you are. I remember you. You're the guy with a really good question. I want you to come visit me. I'm an equity trader here. Come spend a day with me on the trading floor at Merrill Lynch. I did. And because of that, I got an internship that summer on the trading floor of Merrill Lynch. It was, and that, gave me a leeway into the hedge fund world. So it literally, I can come back to one really good question. This guy just recognized it, and it really helped. So a small story, but it just goes to show you how a little bit of effort can have a huge impact. Yeah. And look, for someone who, myself, over the last 17 years, have probably interviewed 200 people, if not more, over my time. And you have to ask good questions. Another thing is you have to know your resume. The first thing I do when I see a resume is I look for where I think someone's embellished it, and I try to poke holes in it, because I want to see if you actually know your stuff. And I can't tell you how many people don't know their own resume. They're like, because it's not familiar with them. And like I said, just ask a lot of questions, follow up with the emails. It sounds like a simple thing, but I'm telling you, a lot of people don't even do it. And it makes a huge difference.
Mike, I want to just add to that, just having a lot of experience with doing interviews as well. The questions, I always leave 5 minutes at the end of every interview to give the candidate an opportunity to ask questions. You can tell a lot about a candidate based on the type of question that they ask. So that's definitely a really good piece of advice. The other thing that I would just make sure, if you're students that are prepping for networking and interviews, is make sure you have good baseline knowledge and foundation about the company that you're interviewing for. From an EY perspective, I have received really good answers to the why EY question in the past. And I've also received the answer that it's a reputable accounting firm and it's a Big Four, and that's why I want to work for them. Well, there's three other Big Four accounting firms that are all very reputable, and so really understanding the organization that you're interviewing for and what they stand for, what's their mission. EY's is building a better working world. What does that mean? KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, they all have their own taglines and missions as well. Making sure you understand what those are and being able to formulate that in a why you want to work for that company or organization, I think is incredibly important.
I completely agree with that. That is an excellent addition. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's some questions here from participants. Jim Slevin, who is my student assistant way back when, and also a fellow Mets fan. He says, I'm
sorry, you're taking a question from a Mets fan? Just kidding.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mets fans have questions but no answers. As accounting finance is a client service business during this work from home time, how are you staying in contact and keeping that human aspects of the business with your clients? We used to do all sorts of fun things with clients, and now that everybody's at home, I guess it's much more difficult to have that and build a relationship with the client. And Lara mentioned that she calls her clients a lot. Any other ideas on how you keep that human aspect and that human relationship with your clients?
I would just add to that point, and Michelle, I think Michelle, Jerry, and Mike all made this point as well, is it's not always all business with the clients. So yes, I'm calling them constantly and on the phone with them. I try to connect with them as much as I can where we're speaking to each other versus through emails, because everybody's getting so many emails this day and age. So if I am going to send an email, and this is really to anybody, it's very brief, because quite honestly, when you get emails that are more than a couple sentences long, they get lost in the inbox. So if you want to do something impactful to connect with somebody in an email, make sure it's brief and a couple of sentences and to the point. But with my clients, it's talking with them, and not just talking to them about business, but understanding what's going on with them. My clients have all gotten to know my kids very well through this pandemic, and the same thing, I've gotten to know their families too, just because we're always all together. And I think that's important to keep the personal connection and the relationship building, for sure.
Yeah. I would
Jerry,
jump
yeah.
on- Yeah, I would say that my clients will always, or I hope that my clients always continue to look at me as their trusted tax advisor, and that's the role that I play. That is what I do. But now they're seeing me as the trusted tax advisor and guy who's trying to plan a wedding and having to deal with wedding planning in the middle of a pandemic. And so they are asking questions about, well, how are you and Nicole doing? What happened? How's the wedding planning? What did you do? Oh my gosh, you had to move your wedding. When is it now? And so those are just another thing to make this human. And we are all human, and we're not all robots who are sitting at our desks at this desk for 20 hours a day and eating for 1 hour and sleeping for 3. It's just not the way it is. We're trying to figure out different things, and it's being at home has afforded us a little bit of different opportunities, and sometimes maybe a few more distractions than we would have wanted or liked. When Michelle and Lara mentioned their kids being in calls and being a part of their everyday, like I'm seeing my clients' kids, my coworkers' kids all the time, and it just adds the normal, and that's the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the new normal. So, but yeah, it's fun.
We have a question from Christopher Au, and he'd like to know, because of the pandemic, and I'll just preface this with the obvious truth, accounting has always been very deadline oriented. How has the pandemic affected your team's work in terms of these deadlines? Were audits and tax deadlines pushed back during the spring? And I'll add to that, how did that make you feel? Michelle, you want to answer that?
Sure. So while the SEC did offer some forms of relief, none of my clients elected to take that relief in terms of filing of their Form 10Ks. I do a couple of retailers. So my one team was the first in the Short Hills office to complete a fully virtual audit this year. We had to still deliver to our client. So what it forced us to do was to reevaluate how we were working. We had to make use of all of the technology that we had available to us and work smarter, using OneNotes. And when we're sitting in our audit room, we always had a whiteboard that we kind of used, and everyone got the satisfaction of when they finished something, they would go and cross it off. So we just moved our whiteboard from the wall in the audit room to a shared OneNote. So as people were finishing things throughout the audit, they would go and cross it off on the whiteboard, and it was our accomplishment. Having, just the virtue, I know we've been talking about this, but the constant touch points and virtual connections to make sure we're still providing the appropriate supervision that's required per the standards, as well as making sure that everyone is getting there. I also had the pleasure of going through a virtual PCOB audit over the course of the last couple of months, and even that, something they were constantly asking us is how are we making sure that we are appropriately supervising our team in the crunch time in this virtual environment. So it's something that's top of mind to our regulators, and certainly, our people are our most important assets. So certainly top of mind to all the firms.
Michelle, we should compare notes, because in the retail space, which is where I spend most of my time, I also did the first fully virtual audit for a March year end. And I was also virtually inspected by the PCOB for that client in July, which is not a coincidence with the industry, right?
Yes.
With all the risk and being the first filers to release financial statements with the impact of COVID on their business. But all of those things are very important. I think that the one takeaway I would have too, because my client did not take the SEC relief, and quite honestly, many of our clients did not take the SEC relief, even if it was for their first quarter filings. It just comes down to the fact that you have to remember you're still part of a team. Nobody is responsible for completing an audit by themselves. They're not responsible for every area. And so you have to be really good and comfortable with delegating up, delegating down, and making sure you're leveraging the skill set and strengths of everybody on your engagement team. Because at the end of the day, the completion of the audit is not because of one person, it's because of all people involved.
And Robert DeValue adds a note here that might not make you feel better. He's a 77 grad. More challenges to come until we complete a 12-month cycle. Annual reports, annual performance reviews will have their challenges. And indeed, we're still making it through our first year of this. And I think it's hard to, I know from our perspective here at Seton Hall, it's hard to think about this as a 1 or 2 year experience, and it's likely to be a 2-year experience. But that's the reality. Sometimes we can look ahead, and sometimes I know from my perspective, maybe Joyce can share a sentiment that it's really hard to talk about the next semester when you're doing everything you can to get the next week's classes together and get them. It's hard to take that long-term perspective, but sometimes we have to do that too. Matt Shank, who it's great to hear from, has a question. Have you considered the experience of being a new hire in the COVID world? It's clear to me they're not getting the same experience we got pre-COVID. I learned by being around practitioners every day and absorbing conversations, so the new hires are at a disadvantage. This poses an obstacle to developing them. That said, does the process of new hire learning and development need to change as well? And if so, how? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, because several students expressed the same kind of concern. Christopher Au also asked, as an incoming audit associate at KPMG, what advice would you give new hires to stand out and demonstrate we are eager, willing, and excited to work and learn as much as possible? Also, how would you recommend we seek out mentors and develop relationships until we begin to work in person again? This is a similar question. I think Andrew has a similar question too, Andrew Herdman. Recent MSPA graduate, I'm starting in the audit practice of RSM in exactly a month from today. And so this is about a specific industry. So I'll come back to Andrew's question in a moment, but let's talk about that. How do you survive? We talked about interviewing, and now let's talk about the first year. How can you stand out if you're starting a position in a virtual environment? And perhaps Lara, you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not very different than what we explained in the interview process. In order to stand out in the virtual environment, it's the same. I would be, don't be shy to reach out to the individuals that are working with you on your engagement teams and setting up one-on-ones with not only the team seniors, but the managers, the senior managers, and hey, even the partner, just to say, would love to catch up with you one-on-one about my first year and my goals and what I would like to accomplish, and just show that initiative, because people will give you the opportunity. I just don't be shy to reach out and ask for it. There's plenty of work to do, and so the opportunities will certainly be given, that's for sure. In terms of learning and new hire development, that's really on the people of the firms. And so I'm sure all of the big four are doing this, but at EY, that's something that we talk about as a partner group and then as a upper level management group on a weekly basis, just how we're connecting with our teams, how we're coaching, what kinds of things we have in place to coach our people, knowing that you are right now missing out on that, being in the audit room with everybody on a day-to-day basis, but making sure that we're continuing to help develop the skills that are required. Because the reality is in the audit practice, and it's the same in tax too, and even industry, a lot of what you learn is on the job. We can put you in as many training courses as we want, and those will all be very important to you to help build a foundation, and you're going to need CPE credits, so that's a benefit of them too. But the reality is you learn on the job, and so it's a two-way investment. It's you being proactive and not being shy to reach out to your team and making them know of your goals and what you want to accomplish. And it's the team's responsibility to make sure they're pulling you in, engaging you, and taking ownership of coaching and helping develop your skill set.
And Jerry or Mike, do you have any additional advice in that arena?
Yeah, look, I think exactly like what was said, you want to call people. I think about, some of the younger people in my firm and how they've, done. It's always the people who have just called me and to start talking about both work and about, personal stuff. And I build a rapport with this person, and if their work is good, then I trust them with more things. And because I trust them with more things, they see more things. And that's how they've kind of risen the ladder. And I've seen that. And there's other people who are not quite as aggressive, don't kind of build that relationship. So it's harder for me to really understand, is this person good? Is this person not as good? So I've got to, base my estimations based off what other people are telling me. So my recommendation, again, like what was said, call people, IM people. Like in my company, we all have our own internal instant messaging system, and we kind of just chat a little bit. You don't want to waste everyone's time, but even a 5-10 minute phone call, just so you're seen, just so you heard, and start asking questions. And look, there's going to be certain people that are going to want to share. There are certain people that just like to talk, and you kind of just listen to those people. And as you listen more and more, you start building a rapport. And I think as long as your work is good, good things will happen.
Yeah, and then again, that's something that I've done with our professors is periodically just call them up. I've spent an afternoon and just call every professor, all of our accounting professors one by one and say, hey, I'm just checking in. Do you have everything that you need? I do it from a perspective of support. Do you have everything that you need? What can I do for you today to help you out? And a lot of times I've learned a lot about what's happening on the ground just by making these calls. And I think they just give everybody the feeling that their work is appreciated and valued. Yeah.
I would say the other thing I would say to not lose sight of in the virtual environment is the relationship with your starting class. Not being in person, right? You're not going to spend a week in Florida at training and build those bonds that way. So it's really important that you're taking advantage of the virtual happy hours or the virtual coffee meetups with your starting class, because those are going to be, your people that you're going to look to for me, the next 10 years, the next 20 years while you're here. Those are your go-tos. So in addition to making sure you're making those connections with those that you're working for, you want to make sure you're also making a connection with your peers, because they're the ones that are going to be there for you. Your mentor is not necessarily someone who is more senior than you. It could also be someone who's starting the same day as you.
Michelle, it's a really great piece of advice. I found that when I started working at Touche Ross and then Deloitte and Touche, we had a week training in the office, and then a week training in Scottsdale. And it was a real cementing experience. And it was kind of like it was really a natural continuation of college that I would with a whole group of peers, and we became very quick friends. I mean, there's still some of my best friends who are people who I started working at Touche Ross with back in 1989. So I think that's a really important point. And the same thing would go for students with your classmates. Reach out to your classmates. And if you have friends who you've been friends with in class, even if you haven't heard from them in a while, give them a call or just send them an email and say, hey, what's new? And people, I know I really value those connections with colleagues, and I've worked very hard on cultivating them in the last 6 months. So it's not just with the people who work for you and the people you work for, but it's also with your colleagues, with your team members at a lot of different levels. I'd just like to wrap up. Oh, wait, there was one more. And Jack Lynch, actually, I want to ask Mike this question because I think the world of hedge funds in particular is very exotic for us accountants. So, Mike, what is the this question comes from Jack Lynch. What's the biggest obstacle your firm has encountered as a result of the pandemic, and what plans have been implemented to overcome that challenge?
Yeah, look, it was a challenge. So in this case, when it first came out, my boss took COVID very seriously. So we actually closed our office down in the city probably a week or two before most other people did. And a lot of it was just figuring out who's going to work on what, how we're going to do a bunch of things. But what I can say, and I think, the really good thing about this is that working from home is possible and virtual does work. During this past year, we've done a public bond offering. We've done a public SPAC offering, which is a special purpose vehicle that's now publicly traded. We've accomplished, a corporate restructure. Like, we've done so many kind of big projects, everyone working from home. So it is possible. There are challenges, and the important thing is always, this is why it's always important to me, I always make sure to have a very, very, very strong team. And I've been lucky where I've been able to hire my own people, and I'm very, very specific in who I hire. So the people I work with are great, and we've worked together for a very long time. So we're in the trenches together getting it all done. But that's been my experience.
So in a way, it's been a cementing experience for people. It's not, often we can think about this as an experience that's broken people apart because there are such physical barriers between us right now. But you're saying it's really been a cementing experience where people have come together.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, again, my team, we see each other virtually every day. And look, there are challenges, there are issues, and it's harder from lots of different points of view, but part of it's easier. And parts of it are, you do have, from my standpoint, at least, I get to spend some more time with my kids, which is great. I've got 3 young kids, so I can actually get to see them, where before it was like, I got to see them on the weekends because my hours are so difficult. But, it's been a challenge, and there's going to be lots of other challenges. But the good thing, and what I always tell people is, accounting is, it's a tool in your toolbox. It's an important thing. It's like your hammer in your toolbox. So it's a very important tool, but it can't be your only thing, right? You've got to be a really good business person, and you really want to focus on all different aspects, whether it be social, making sure you have a strong team, make sure people have respect for you. And you do want to be that go-to person, right? And
right.
Dr. Holtzman, like you were saying before, you want to be that person when someone has a question, whether it's GAAP or tax or so forth, they come to me and they know when I give them the answer, it's going to be the right one, because I've researched it and I'm not going to tell them something that I don't know.
Okay, and one last question is from Andrew Herdman, and this is to a very specific point, but I think it speaks to how to reach out to and look for mentors. Andrew, my question is aimed towards the life science and pharmaceuticals professionals on the panel. I'm not sure if I have life science and pharmaceuticals professionals, but have you, Jerry, you're shaking your head?
Yeah, that's my area.
Okay, so in life science and pharmaceuticals, any advice on how to excel in this specific industry for a new professional?
So it's an interesting question, because life sciences and pharma is so broad. You don't have just the research and development company who's developing a cure for cancer. You don't just have a medical device company who's developing a new knee or a new replacement part for your body. You're talking about those people who are also developing generics. Those people who are just in it for the science and just the research entirely. So for a new hire, I think the important thing is to figure out, as you're getting involved with your clients, you need to know your client. You need to know what are their products, what are the things that they do, how do they do it, and where do they do it. And everyone is different. There are new sciences coming out right now that are more of a technology rather than a pill like a Tylenol pill. That type of science is probably the more antiquated, old type of science. There are not many pills that are coming out in terms of the pipeline. It's now biologics, which is more of a science. It's more chemicals. And then the second one now is going to be a technology where your body is fighting the disease itself, which is totally revolutionary, and it's changing rapidly. So I would say you need to learn what the science is. You have to understand it. You have to partially be a scientist. If you do your job well, you know your client and not just the numbers on their balance sheet or P&L, but actually know what they do.
And
know
that's
what they
really
do.
true for, I think, Jerry, that's really true for any industry that you go into, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You have to not just know the accounting for the industry and the finance, but you need to know the specifics of the industry and how the industry works. If you're in retail, you need to know the nuts and bolts of retail marketing. And you really can't do the accounting. You can't do an audit unless you understand the nuts and bolts of retail marketing. If you're in retail fashion, to understand that world too, and so on. So any industry someone goes into, you have to understand that industry and what's happening in that industry.
Correct. That's right. That's right. And honestly, at the end of the day, when everything is all pushed aside, accounting is accounting. A debit is on the left and a credit is on the right. But the real question for any professional is, how are they going to make the revenues go up and the assets go up and the debt go down? And how do you help them get?
You got that from my class.
Oh, I did. I absolutely did. But at the end of the day, that's the goal. And when you do it really, really well, your clients really, really love you. When you don't do it really well, your clients move to other firms, they go to other advisors. And I personally, I'm the type of person that I like to think of myself a little bit selfish, because if my client goes to another firm for tax advice, I get offended because they're my client. And if I wasn't, to Mike's point, if I wasn't able to give them that advice and they couldn't feel that they could come to me, I have not done my job well enough. So always make it your personal best to be offended when your client goes to other firms, because that means that gives you the opportunity to do better. And so.
Thank you, Jerry. As we conclude, I'd like to have each of our industry guests, in 30 seconds or less, share perhaps a little piece of closing advice you'd like to share with our audience today. And let's start with Mike.
Yeah, so again, thank you, Mark, for setting everything up. And look, again, for everyone who's watching and listening, it was like I was saying before, really try to focus on being a really good business person. Whether you're auditing, whether you're doing your tax return, whether you work for a firm, it's all about figuring out how to make the business better. How can you add value to whatever you're doing? Don't just focus on making sure, what I always try to tell people is, don't be a button presser. Don't be one of those people who are like, well, look, I go to my work, I go to my job, I press these 15 buttons and I go home. Because those people, look, at some point in the future, they're not going to be around. You want to be that person who's going in there and really helping a business run, really figuring out how to make things more efficient. That's how you're going to get ahead.
And Lara?
Sure. My advice would be, don't underestimate the power of relationships, and don't be afraid to reach out to individuals to start a conversation or schedule a virtual coffee, because whether you're a student or a recent grad, I will tell you that I will take those calls every time I get them, and I'm sure everybody else on this panel will too. So don't be afraid and value relationships, because they will be very important as you succeed through your careers.
Yeah, that's really great advice too. Michelle? Are you on mute?
Those are really hard ones to follow up on. I'll reiterate what I said earlier. No matter where you start, be a student of the firm where you're starting your new job, and get to know everything you can, and think outside the box as much as possible, and appreciate the mentors that that you'll develop along the way.
Thank you. Jerry?
You are going to have very tough days and you're going to have very easy days. Treasure both, because you learn the most in the toughest days and you pride yourself on the good days. And at the end of the day, you're all Seton Hall students and eventually you'll be graduates. And if you're already a graduate, you already learned this well. But at the end of the day, you need to always do good. Do good for your clients, do good for your friends and your family, and do good for yourself. So my word of advice is do good.
Too good. All right. On that note, I'd like to thank again our industry guests, our attendees. Also thank the people who planned this event: Emily Seguin, Erica, Daniela, Dean Onimus, all for putting it together. It's been a very interesting event, and I feel privileged to have worked with you all. We know these are challenging times we're experiencing, and we appreciate your taking the time to join us. So again, I thank our alumni team and Stillman School of Business who helped develop the panel. Thank you everybody for attending tonight, and let's go Pirates.